I guess the assumption is people are more bigger than smaller. So we don't have that issue. Hi, Tiona. Okay, so we are getting started. So this is so nice. I'm so happy that Tiona's feeling better and therefore able to come. So that's good. And I'm happy Dina is still here and therefore able to come. Great. And we're happy Elle is back in town and able to come. Yes. Yes. So exciting. So exciting. And so nice. Usually we have a new participant who's never been in a class like this before. So we're so excited. Thanks to Shira, you know, just recruiting. Exactly. So okay, it's good you put out that word. We want everyone to recruit, including our newest recruit, because there's always a sense of like, oh, when we were doing it on Zoom, so many more people were able to come. But I do feel that it's very, very special in person. So try to get your friends and their friends and their friends so we can really make it happen in person as well. All right, so we were discussing, last week we began this discussion on honoring of our parents, which might seem like, oh, well, that's like, you know, we all know we got to honor our parents, move on, what's there to talk about? When we actually start talking, there's loads to talk about because we all have parents and we all are parents. So it becomes a very personal subject as versus when you're in like 6th grade and the teacher tells you got to honor your parents. I'm like, yeah, we know that. So we were discussing the idea of, according to Torah law, there's 2 aspects of honoring our parents. There's the aspect of revering them and the aspect of what we call honoring them. Reverence and honor, which are 2 slightly different things. Reverence, we said, is the idea of don't do anything to harm them. Don't do anything to lessen anything that's important to them. Don't do anything to demean them. Don't do anything to denigrate their dignity. So sages give examples like don't sit in their place, don't contradict them. But all of these are examples of doing something that makes them feel smaller. Like if you, like, let's say, I'm just thinking of a practical example that once happened something like this to me. Like, let's say your parent is older and they're not hearing properly or understanding properly. So you sort of mouth to the other person like, it's okay, like they didn't really understand. And then they catch it and then they're furious with you. That's called denigrating them. Like, you know, like, hello, I'm not a child, even though sometimes I don't hear properly, sometimes I don't understand properly, sometimes I'm not with it enough to get the flow of the conversation. But, you know, it's like, you can't denigrate the honor. We have to always, always, always be respectful. And then honoring them means the proactive act of giving to them. Like the sages say, food, drink, clothing, transportation. What it basically means is treating them as someone of importance, treating them as someone of significance. And a lot of times we feel that's beautiful, but I don't have time. Like, I want to give my parents above and beyond, but I don't have time. Something that I think is just a practical inspiration is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was probably far busier than any of us. Every single day he visited his mother. His mother lived in New York for 17 years, the last 17 years of her life. And every single day he made time, and he was never too busy. He was never too busy to visit her. And that's like, you know, yes, her husband was a victim of the Stalinist persecution. And yes, the 20th of his passing, and he suffered. He was the chief rabbi of the whole Ukraine, and he was very strong and very forthright, and he didn't cow to pressure. And he is very interesting because he's really sacrificed. It was like he felt the Jews in Russia, they wouldn't be able to keep all the mitzvahs because of the persecutions and the communism. So he selected one mitzvah that he wanted to really highlight for them, and that was the mitzvah of Matza. Because Matza gives faith. And for like 5 years in a row, he defied the government and insisted on putting out truly kosher matzah, absolutely, really kosher matzah. And after 5-6 years of doing this, they arrested him and called him a rebel against the government because he was causing an economic loss, because he would say this flour is not good enough and this flour isn't good enough. And he was basically tortured for a year and then sent into exile. And after 4 years, at the end of the 4 years, he had pancreatic cancer. Seems like that's what he suffered from, and he passed away right after his exile finished. Of course, it was during World War II, so he couldn't get back anywhere. But he got to at least a Jewish place, so he had a Jewish burial. He's buried in Alma-Ata in Russia. But it's very interesting because I have a class of women that are all basically from Russia, and it's very interesting for all of them. Their only Jewish awareness was matzah.
Really?
Yes. Now you come from a much freer place in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, that there was more religious freedom, I think. Yeah. But
you guys were secluded.
So my parents came from a small village of Kuba, which is located on the south part of Russia, Azerbaijan. And our tradition is like more.
yeah, Sephardic, right. But in Azerbaijan, I know there was more religious freedom.
Right.
Right. So
in small.
right. I know. I met other people from there. Right. So it was you had the ability, but in the rest of the USSR, there was such a clamp on them. But it's very interesting because all of these women generally knew nothing except matzah. They might not know the word Pesach, but they knew the word matzah. They had a matzah. Anyway, so that was in the, I don't know, like towards the end of World War II, probably like 45 or something, 44, 45. So yes. But I was taking as like we're busy people. And sometimes parents have a lot of demands and a lot of needs. And of course, then you also have in-laws that you're also supposed to respect as your parents, and they have demands and needs.
You have the same obligations to in-laws.
You have the same obligation to your in-laws as your parents. Yes.
Is that crazy?
I'm sorry.
I love
I love that. Oh, you have to keep Shabbos? No, I'm not Makala that one. I did a few others. I don't believe God really gave it.
Respect, but like from a distance.
The same way.
No, seriously, can you respect, be respectful and be proper and do what's right with in-laws?
Yes.
But keep a distance for your mental health.
Of course, if you, any parent, it doesn't have to be in-laws. Okay, so what you're asking is, what about if someone's toxic for your mental health?
Not toxic, but
Not
I would
toxic.
say not healthy, you know?
Someone's not healthy. Well, it depends on the word.
All of your in-laws are healthy. Come on.
My mother-in-law is amazing, but so there are great in-laws out there.
You're an exception.
In general, any parent, or it's no different between a parent and in-law, it's the same rule for both. Any parent or in-law that is stressful for our mental health, the question is it an abusive relationship, or is it someone who's mentally unwell? That's the question we have to ask. If it's someone who's mentally unwell, then definitely our sages say exactly what you're saying. You have to give them all the respect. You have to give them all the reverence, but you're allowed to do it at a distance. And the example the sages give of at a distance is hire someone else to help them. Like maybe you can't take care of their needs personally because of how you're going to suffer by being in contact with them, but that doesn't mean you're exempt from taking care of their needs. But you're allowed, as long as there's someone who's, competent and good and, going to do a good job, you're allowed to hire someone so you're not personally interacting if that would be difficult. If a parent is abusive, then there's a whole question on, are you even obligated to honor them? That's a whole different category, as our sages discuss, as we'll touch on. But in general, if it's not abuse, but it's just not mentally well, which of course is also a tremendous problem, but it could definitely create a lot of pain in the relationship. So I think as we mentioned, I think it's very important to understand when someone's mentally not well, that a lot of times it's not them, it's the illness that's attacking you, especially as parents get older. As people age, they have paranoias. That's very common in really elderly people. They actually have depression. That's very common in very elderly people. And the paranoia could definitely extend to the child, and that does happen. So when you're suffering from that, it's really important to understand it's not my loving mother, my loving father that I know is so loving. It's the illness. And unfortunately, a person suffered from it their entire life. And for your entire life, you have to say, it's not my parent, it's their illness. It's not the parent, it's the illness. Because it's really important for us to discriminate, because we don't discriminate, it's really hard to feel that, you know, that ability to really honor and revere them like we're supposed to. Now, so there's a lot of obligations, but also what we're told, which sort of flows into what I was just answering, there also is supposed to be an internalization of an attitude. Meaning, it's not just what I do, it's how I do it. Because a person could be technically doing what they're supposed to be doing and giving the appropriate honor and, you know, trying to be there for them, but very begrudgingly, you know, with like a not good feelings. Now, parents are people too, and in-laws are people too, and they pick up the feelings. So if you're doing everything you think right, but the feeling is negative, they pick it up, and it's not considered like you're giving honor. And it's not considered like you're giving reverence, because the feeling you're giving them is like, like, I gotta do this. I don't really want to do this. I don't really have time for you in my life. I'm like, you know, whatever. So then they feel like they don't feel good. They feel at the least that they're imposing on you, or much worse. So we're told that when a child does this, even if the child, again, child, I'm assuming he's already an adult, when the child of this parent does this, then even though technically they're giving the parent the best, but it's like they're giving them the worst. And conversely, we're told if a child has very little he can do for his parent, just because of his own economic situation or something like that. But whatever you're doing, you do with love and compassion and such a feeling of, I want to be there for you. I want to give you the most I can. This is the best. The sages give a very incredibly intense example. They say if someone would have his father, his aged father, grinding a millstone, you think, oh my gosh, that's abuse, parent abuse. But he's saying to his father, I want to give you food, but I don't have any flour. And if you can help me, we can grind this wheat into flour, and then I can make food for you. And I so much want to do this for you. That's considered a child who's incredibly honoring his parent.
Are you supposed to be your parents' shoes on?
If they need it, for sure.
No,
if it was needed. I think like everything in life, we can't judge until we're in that place, and by definition, we're never going to be in the place of our parents or in-laws until we're like 20 years older than we are now.
The father thought that his kids were following another aim by getting his shoes and putting them on his feet.
If that, you know what the point is? If that's what he needs, then that is keep it up.
He's not like, he was an old man, he's like 35.
It doesn't make a difference. If that's what he needs, then that's keep it up.
He needs it because he's like selfish, or he's trying to be served.
Maybe he needs to be served. It's not. It's really not. That wouldn't fall under either of the two categories. It's not abusive and it's not mental illness. So it's just how different parents and different cultures are served. Now, probably this father, when he was a child, did the same for his parent. And that's how he understood you honor your parents. And it goes in both directions. Like I'll say, it was very beautiful way. By my 25th wedding anniversary, my children really went all out. They had a beautiful party. And when I asked my daughter afterwards, I'm like, you know, wow, it's so nice. You did so much for us. You know, I don't know if I was the greatest mom. You know? And she's like, me and her father, she said, you're both so family oriented. You so prioritize family. So it's just natural for us. And it works in both directions. If a child always put on his father's shoes, that's how he grew up. That's appropriate. That's respect. And that's what he would naturally assume his children would do.
He hated it.
Well, maybe other pieces were missing. But I don't know if that's the problem. I don't think that's the problem.
I'm saying it's not like other mitzvahs that if you do them, regardless of your attitude,
Exactly.
you still get card.
Exactly.
There's absolutely no
Our
Value,
sages use a
unless
very strong
full
word. Our
value.
sages say, so Tiona's saying, I'm doing this for the benefit of people on Zoom that don't hear the questions. That's a very good question. Tiona is saying, so you're saying, unlike other mitzvahs, that if I don't do it with the right feeling, it's like a zero. And then it depends on how bad the feeling is. I don't want to say zero, but it depends. But our sages say, if someone is feeding his father pheasants, which was a very, very expensive bird, that was considered like the top of the top of the top, deluxe. This could be something that would drive him out of this world because he was doing it with such a negative feeling. So again, I think there's a middle ground between doing it with the tremendous love and compassion and doing it with negative feelings where, yeah, negative feelings is zero. If your parent feels like I have a sensitive friend who says she doesn't eat at restaurants because when you eat restaurants, all she tastes is money. You know, she just tastes it and every bite, she just can't eat there. It's very sensitive. She's like, I can't eat when, and I feel like, you know, that's always like people love their mother's cooking because mothers just invest love, you know, like you feel it in the food. It's not the taste of the food. My kids come home, they want my food. I'm like, my food's very simple. But it's like, there's something about your mother's food, you know? So I think there is. So I'm saying, like in this example, the sages are giving, if someone's feeding their parents the best of the best with this, like, oh, I wish you weren't here. I wish you weren't bothering me. Why don't you go to my sister or my brother? Or why are you coming to me now? You know, if a person has that feeling, you taste it. You feel it. So our sages are saying, if you're doing it that way, not so don't serve your parents, but understand, yeah, change your attitude. Actions are supposed to change us on the inside. There's a very amazing principle that I've quoted many times, but I think it's so powerful. And it has so much to do with serving God. After the actions comes the feelings. The actions are supposed to inculcate feelings. When we're taught to be compassionate to animals, right? That's a principle of Torah, to be compassionate to animals. Because we're supposed to be compassionate people. And if we're allowed to be cruel because they're only animals, it would make us cruel people. We're supposed to be compassionate, right? Think of, there's so many laws that inculcate compassion, kindness, respect. So I'm not saying if you do the act without the feeling, stop doing the act. I'm saying really understand, I have to work on myself. And if you've been doing the actions and you really know you don't have the feelings, then I would assume there's a blockage, and the blockage probably is something you would like with your childhood. You know, maybe, and it even could be towards your in-laws because it could be some pain you went through and therefore it's carrying over to them. But it's not necessarily them, it's your feeling in terms of parents or in-laws or those relationships. And to really work on unlocking them because you're not a child now. You are an adult, you are safe, nobody's hurting you. And this is something God really, really needs.
Yeah, but as you get older and wiser,
You reflect more.
The depth of the damage.
Yes, it's
It's
true.
even harder.
Well, I sometimes feel like
There's hard opinions that if you were considered, I guess if you were abused or.
so I said abuse is different, but there's people that were harmed that were not abused.
Right.
Abuse and harm is not the same. Someone could not be, I'm speaking to a woman who definitely was harmed in her childhood. She definitely was not abused. There was no abuse going
How
on.
do you expect
There was no
her to
subtle
like
abuse.
that?
Like psychological harm?
No, like for example, I mean, you know, like let's say sensitive people that were teased a lot by their siblings. Was there any abuse? There's no abuse. Countless people go through it, but some people are very harmed by it.
Right.
Some people are in class and they're bullied, not extremely bullied. There's bullying, and even if it gets stopped, there's some people that carry that pain for 30 years, and some people they didn't even feel it that
But
day.
you're still supposed to have that really good feeling about your
People
parents.
whose parents argued the whole time when they were growing up. There's no abuse. They weren't being abusive to their child. They weren't being abusive to each other. Unfortunately, there was a lot of disharmony, a lot of friction in the home. So people could be incredibly harmed by that. It's not abuse. The parents are not being abusive and the child is being harmed. Right?
How are you supposed to have that feeling for your parents?
Someone I'm involved in now, she's going through a horrific breakdown of her marriage, whatever, bad stuff going on. And she's getting a little dysfunctional. She's not abusive at all. She loves her children. She wants to be there for her children. She's carrying a tremendous amount on her emotional plate right now. So she's not really able to be there, which she knows, but like there's nothing she can do about it right now. So kids can get harm. Abuse and harm is not synonymous. And I think that's important for us to understand. An abusive person is trying to hurt. If someone is trying to hurt, that's abuse. They could be hitting, they could be physical abuse, they could be emotional abuse, psychological abuse, but the goal of an abuser is to hurt. A parent who has absolutely no intention of hurting their child and absolutely loves their child could still create pain in their child, could create trauma in their child's life. And that's not because they were trying to be hurtful. And it's not because they're mentally ill. It's just because life sometimes happens that way. And sometimes people don't have very good tools. Or sometimes someone's frustrated. I shared a case with someone, a man that I was working with, who said his mother once said to him, said a horrible sentence to him when he was probably like maybe 13, horrible sentence to him, which he's psychologically damaged from till this day, and he's in his 60s. But no, it was a really bad sentence, and it really hit him hard, and he internalized it. He internalized it. Obviously, she was frustrated. She was stressed. She was in Russia. There was probably wars going on. Like a lot was on her plate. And he loves his mother, and she's still alive, and she lives in Chicago, and he's the best son in the world for her. That doesn't take away the harm she gave him that he's still dealing with.
Right, so when
You understand what I'm saying? It's the two are not. It sounds weird. The two are completely not
If
incompatible.
you're hurt by your parents, how do you take care of them with like your full love?
So that's what I'm saying. So this man who has fully loves his mother and is fully there for his mother and does everything for her above and beyond, and he was incredibly damaged by her, because even though she damaged him, it didn't take away his love for her and her love for him. The love is still there, even though the damage is still there. You have a very complex, full. So if it wasn't there because the love wasn't there, or as you're saying, as you get older and you reflect more and you realize the trauma. So sometimes I feel that there's like a little, I call it like a little child inside of us that never got healed. You know, and you could be 50, you could be 60, and there's a little child inside of you that never grew up and that was still harmed. Was harmed because they felt unsafe, unloved, they were left alone, you know, whatever, things happen. And that little child never healed. And it's sometimes I really feel there's lots of different work you have to do to like calm that child, reassure that child, and in essence, get rid of that child.
So luckily they still have to serve their parents with that same love.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was no abuse, there's no mental illness. It just sometimes happens in life. And I don't think it's so uncommon. People have a lot of things on their plate, and you don't realize every time you say a harsh word, again, depending on the sensitivity of the child, how much it's hurting them. Every time you have an attitude, your attitude is, "Ugh, I wish you weren't around right now. Ugh, you're so annoying." Imagine a parent who's like, "Ugh, feeling, ugh, this kid's driving me crazy," and they're not very subtle, and the child feels it, and the child grows up, you know, regular, normal, healthy family. And they're home for the first, 17 years of their life. And for 17 years of their life, the feeling they get from either their father or their mother or both is, "Ugh, you're so annoying. Ugh, you're so annoying. Ugh, you're so annoying." So there's a lot of harm there. There's a lot of damage. There's a lot of damage going on. It doesn't mean the parents aren't loving. It doesn't mean the parents aren't supportive. It doesn't mean the parents are mentally unwell. It means that is life sometimes. And then obviously if the parents can change, that's great. But also, you know, the child sometimes has to just really work on saying, my parents were doing the best they could with the tools they had. I don't understand the stresses in my parents' life, or maybe I do. I don't understand what my parents were going through. And, you know, I just have to forgive and release, because if I don't forgive and release, I carry it around inside of me forever. And it's a very, very, very big burden that's draining me of a lot of my ability to live a full, productive, happy life. It could give me a lot of fear. Like some of these people that are older and they're not engaged, they're not getting married. Some of them they're consciously or subconsciously they're sabotaging because they're scared because of what they went through. It doesn't mean there was abuse. It doesn't mean there was mental illness. It just means sometimes it's hard to raise kids, and sometimes parents are not very skilled, and sometimes parents are very self-absorbed, and sometimes parents have too much on their plate and they just don't do a good job. But I think as we get older and we reflect, we also have to really forgive. We have to forgive. And forgiveness just is like releasing it. And if we don't forgive, we don't release, and we carry it inside of us. And if we can forgive and we can say, Sometimes, I don't know, it's true in parents, like sometimes, like let's say it was siblings. Sometimes, a person just like, the brunt of all the family, whatever, it happens, normal families, not, not unusual at all. But sometimes a person's sensitive and goes up and is really harmed by it. It's really sometimes healthy to just say to their sibling, like, I just want to vent. I just want to like download everything I'm feeling. And what I need from you is to apologize. I need some closure on this. I need you to apologize. I need to be able to move on. And sometimes that's very, very, very helpful.
You can't do it to a parent.
I don't know if you could do it to a parent. It would depend on the relationship. I don't know if you could do it to a parent.
Can you bring your parents to a therapist?
What?
Can you bring your parents to a therapist?
Can you bring them to a therapist?
Very
No. Can you suggest if you said someone?
Hey, let's go together.
No, you could say like, oh, I know so-and-so was really helped by whoever, this therapist. And I know there's so much stress in your life now. You have to deal with this, and this. Might be helpful. That you could say.
No, for your relationship with them.
Only if you could say it in a respectful and loving fashion.
No, because they're gonna be insulted.
If they're insulted,
Well,
no.
we have therapists, you can deal with us and I can deal with you. That's they're
Right.
Yeah, so this isn't a third person. Yeah.
But sometimes it could, I think the way to go, if truly you felt a therapist would be helpful, and you truly know a therapist who's amazing, I wouldn't say it's for our relationship. I would just say like, you're dealing with so much now, so-and-so is older and that puts so much stress on you, or this thing in your life, nothing to do with you, of course. So I heard they're amazing. I'd be willing to help with the cost because I just really I think it'd be so great. And then nothing to do with you. And then if they go and there's a good relationship that's forming, other things can come out that would heal. But I wouldn't say like for us. But it's true. I don't know if you could. I don't know if you could ask your parents to acknowledge the hurt they did, the harm they did for you, because I don't know if you're allowed to do that, because that again is taking away all the stuff that our sages are saying you're supposed to do. But maybe you could have like a surrogate conversation in your brain as if it happened, as if you downloaded it. You're not supposed to share it with your husband.
Really?
What?
I know it's weird. People don't think gossip, like you and your husband are one soul. So like you're just talking to yourself out loud.
No, I
But
think
actually-
you want to share it, if it's like topless, then it's okay.
If it's helpful.
Then was your husband different than anyone else that you're sharing for it to be okay? That'd be true for any
Support.
situation.
Yeah.
Like, you're like one person to like.
Advice, support, how to deal with it.
I always thought.
If it's advice, then that's true for anyone that's got nothing to do with your husband. The best thing is if you need advice in a situation, you could share it with someone, ideally without saying any names involved. So you're not discussing this person, you're trying to solutionize. With your husband, it's actually the hardest to do that with because he knows too well the people. So it's easier with someone that doesn't know as well, and you can.
But then he can give you the better advice because he knows that people know.
Sometimes, sometimes advice is best from a distance. It's very interesting, the difference between our heart and our mind. That the heart is within. To really feel, you got to be within. You can't feel from a distance. But the mind actually is set up to be a little remote from a situation, because when there's a remoteness, you can see it clearly. And that's why you could go to a therapist, a counselor, a rabbi, and they have such good advice for you. You're like, why didn't I think of that? And the reason you didn't think of it is because you're within the situation. So you can't see it clearly. And when someone's a little bit removed, they can see it more clearly. But what I would say where it's not lashon hara, where it's not gossip, will be a situation where both of you are experiencing the same thing. So if it's something going on in your life and you're both experiencing it, and obviously it's not gossip, you both know the story. So talking about it is not gossiping. You are truly trying, you're not reviewing the details. We know the details. We're trying to solutionize. But I'm going to put out a word there that we've discussed in other situations, and it's very important to remember. Negative talk reinforces a negative reality. Like when talking about a husband and a wife, let's say they're talking about a child. I mean, it's no gossip. This is our child. And it's actually no gossip to tell a parent anything about a child, because that's allowed. So definitely still gossip for the parents to talk and discuss a child. That's what they're supposed to do. But if the discussion means, oh, they're so annoying. Oh, they're so proud. Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're doing this. What in essence you're doing is reinforcing the negativity by discussing it and emphasizing it and energizing it. So you can and should and must have those discussions with your spouse about your children. Obviously there's no issue of gossip at all, but you want to have the discussion very carefully, meaning you don't want to say anything negative. You want to start from the basis that we both know the history, including the history of what happened today. And if you don't know the details, it's irrelevant because you know what happened yesterday and the day before. And let's just talk forward. What can we do to help this situation?
Are you gonna tell your husband to tell his mom something?
Not if it's going to create negativity in the relationship between the child and the parent. You shouldn't do that because you're stressing his relationship. It's better for you to detach from the relationship than to harm a relationship.
That's a judge's situation.
Yeah.
Right, again.
Something is better coming from your husband to his mother than you.
No, like my daughter was really upset her buddy wasn't gonna come to her bar mitzvah. So she couldn't, it was too hard for her, but then the next day she's flying to New York for a wedding. We can't drive an hour and a half, so she was really hurt. I'm like, you gotta tell your mom, like, she refused to come. There's no excuses, and he told her, he said, she's really hurt, after you're not driving her ass here, and you're there bar mitzvah. And I told her, first he's like, no, I don't wanna call. I'm like, you need to call her.
I think it depends on the parent and the situation, depends on a lot of factors. Maybe in your case, it was exactly the right thing to do. In other cases, it would not be the right thing to do. It would depend on, would the person get offended? Would they get insulted? Their priorities.
What about your kids being hurt?
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not the same. In other words, they did it and it worked out and it was beautiful and that was a great solution. But in other situations, that wouldn't be appropriate. And the person would be saying, excuse me, because I'm traveling the next day to New York and it's incredibly draining and I need to conserve my resources. And this is a wedding and it's a wedding, I don't know who the wedding was, but it's a wedding that I have to be at. So I can't drive an hour and a half and an hour and a half back. I can't even be driven in the car because it's going to physically drain me and I won't be able to do what I need to do the next day.
Choose a friend's wedding over your granddaughter's bar mitzvah.
You don't know someone else's life. Maybe there's a reason why they have to make that choice. It worked in your situation, but I don't think that's a carte blanche, thing of like, it has to be.
It's okay to tell people what you feel.
Not always. No, it's not always okay to tell people what you feel. It's not always okay to tell people what you feel. Absolutely not. It's absolutely not okay to tell people what you feel. If you're venting your feeling and it hurts another person, that's not okay. For what benefit?
Not to hurt them, but to have something, come from it.
Well, first of all, you have to think before you ever open your mouth, is anything going to come from this? Is this person at all receptive? If I'm going to say, by the way, when you didn't invite me to your party, it really hurt me. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, get a life. What did you gain? All you gained was that you shared your hurt them, and you knew they wouldn't listen. You knew it wasn't going to change them at all. So what was the point of it? It was just something negative. It was, you were thinking, we have this fantasy, let's say with our husbands. We're going to say something and then he's going to respond and we're going to have a deep, meaningful conversation and it's going to be so wonderful. And you rehearse this all day long, of course. And then he comes home and you have your opening line and he just doesn't respond. He keeps on eating, and, the end. And you're so hurt and you just don't get it. So it's not always, if I feel it, therefore I'm supposed to say it. Feelings don't legitimize my right to say it to someone. And especially I have to think, is the other person going to hear it? And is anything good going to come out of it? But again, I could say for myself, it's not exactly the same situation, but I just speaking of myself as hopefully a non-abusive, healthy person. This goes back a few years ago. My son and daughter-in-law came for the weekend. I think it was my father-in-law's his 90th birthday. I don't remember exactly the details. I think it was his 90th birthday. So we had this beautiful party that I worked very hard for Thursday night. And we had a whole beautiful Shabbos. And then Tuesday or Wednesday in the week was my grandson's first birthday. And they, of course, thought we were going to drive down. I'm like, no way. I am not. I have enough respect for my limits. I'm not doing it. I mean, they hoped. Let's put it like that. They definitely hoped.
They told you.
I don't know if that. I mean, it was out there. We're making this great party, and I'm like, I'm really not up to it.
It's unremoved from the situation. What I would have done is at this 90th party, I would have had a second cake. It's a double celebration. First birthday for Wendy.
Great.
And then it's like.
Then you took it. They accepted it. They know my limitations. They know I find it incredibly exhausting to drive down there. But it didn't hurt our relationships at all. But I'm just saying, in my world, I felt completely legitimate not going down for my first grandson's first birthday party. To me, it just wasn't important enough. I was like, he's not. I mean, I said if he was older and he'd appreciate it, there's a reason. For his parents, I just saw Shabbos, my beloved son. No, he can get it. Again, I'm just putting it out there. I don't think there's always carte blanche. I don't think it's always like, if I would do this, therefore they should do this. And I think we always have to have that giving the, the favorable opinion on how do I know what's going on in someone else's life, including my parents, including my in-laws, for me to judge. But again, that doesn't mean you can never say anything. I think you could say it respectfully. You could say it sensitively. Like, let's taking that example. Obviously, the person doesn't call and say, Ma, you got to come. It's about mitzvah. So-and-so is going to be really harmed. I really expect to see you there tomorrow. Obviously, you wouldn't do something like that. But if you would say, I know you're really busy. I know you're going to New York the next day. I know you're probably preparing for the trip. I just wanted you to know that whoever loves you so much and you're so valuable in her world. So if you don't come to her bat mitzvah, she's going to be really crushed.
I have a friend who actually has to say that whenever she wants to cut us something, because they need to be so needed. So she has to call me, she has to say, we love you so much.
Yeah.
We need you so
And that's
much.
good. And that's great. And that's honoring.
I was gonna say.
but that's fine. No, that's fine. That's honoring them. Yeah, but that's fine. But I'm just trying.
Sometimes at the beginning, you just have to play the game.
No, but what I'm trying to, it's not a game. That's actually what you're supposed to do. So my beautiful presentation of so-and-so loves you so much and you're so meaningful in her life. It's true. Otherwise, why is the kid going to be hurt if you're not there? Like, what does she care? Oh, my grandma, as long as she sends me a gift, what do I care? No, she wants her at her bat mitzvah. So that means the grandma is valuable in her world and she is going to be hurt. But instead of saying it of like, I really expect to see you tomorrow, to say, you're putting a wedding in front of your granddaughter's bat mitzvah, just say, you're so meaningful and it's so important to her. And I know you have so much on your plate. I know you're preparing for this trip. I know you're gonna be so drained. It's a huge deal to drive an hour and a half each way. But if you could do it, it'd be really, really meaningful. So that was beautifully respectful. There was nothing disrespectful. The person feels so loved, so honored, so needed. They might actually decide to come because of that. And definitely if they do or if they don't, you were 100%. But giving that same message in those harsh, demanding words is like sub-zero. So a lot of times it has to do with the feeling tone. This is the point we're trying to say, that feeling tone of conveying we love and respect and therefore really hope you can come versus we're annoyed and frustrated and really want you here.
Like with your spouse, I really like when there's lights on the outside. I'd be like, oh God, I really love when there's light in the house. Because I'd be like, can't you change it over already?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what else, Sharon? From this, we all learn how to be good mother-in-laws and our kids. Seriously, it's a lesson.
Well, even more than that, which we're going to stop now because we're going to do Parsha and Elul, but from this, you understand how to be the parents that will make it the easiest for your children to be respectful, right? Because, and a very big piece of that is how they see how you treat your parents and your in-laws. That they absorb more than any lesson and any lecture is what they see day in, day out, how you're there or not, loving or resentful to your parents and your in-laws. That's what the kids are picking up. So when you say these beautiful, sweet words on the phone, and then when you get off the phone, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had to say that again. The kids hear it. The kids absorb it, especially if it happens once a week for their entire life. So they learn, say sweet things, but don't really mean them. So it's really very, 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 very on us always. You can't fake from your kids. Your kids know. Okay, so we're going to stop here because we want to briefly touch on two things. First, today is Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the month.
Here's your question. Why do you have two? How come some of them are 2 days and some are 1?
Because it's a great question. Because the Jewish calendar is lunar. It's not solar. It's a lunar calendar, but it also has a solar component. Meaning the Islamic calendar is completely lunar. The Christian calendar, which is a Gregorian calendar that the world follows, is completely solar. So it's a day. It's, a cycle of 24 hours. The Jewish calendar is lunar, but because of, and I think it was last week's Torah portion, like 4 words, we have this whole solar component. I was thinking as I was reading, I was like, those little 4 words created so many laws. oh gosh, I can't remember in Hebrew, but that Pesach, in the spring.
Oh, the Chodesh of the-
Right, that it's in the spring. So because Pesach has to be in the spring, just because of those little, like, literally, I read it was 4 words that Pesach is in the spring. That's the whole reason we have all the complexity of keeping our calendar in line with the seasons. But because it's lunar, the cycle of the moon is not exactly 29 days. It's not exactly 30. It's like 29 and a certain amount of hours. So how do we balance it to keep a calendar on sync? Our calendars are structured, meaning originally the new moon was declared when witnesses saw the moon and they ran to Jerusalem and they were tested and it was truly the moon, because people can also try to be false and mess it up, because based on the moon is a whole cycle of the holidays. There's many important things in Jewish law. So we really tested these witnesses, and the sages would prepare all this lavish food for the witnesses. Let's say you saw the moon. By the way, you're the 57th person that came and told us. They didn't make them feel like that at all. They had food out there and drink out there. It was a whole party. Why? Because they wanted everyone to feel really good. So they'd keep coming every month because they had to make sure they know when the moon is. It's very, very, very important for all Jewish life to function, knowing the moon. But after the destruction of the Second Temple, not like the day after, but a few hundred years later, the sages are like, we're not going to keep this up anymore. Like, it's not working. We're all going to be exiled. We won't have this system. What are we going to do? And with enormous brilliance, they made a 19-year calendar. If you've ever heard this idea that every 19 years, your secular and Jewish birthday are the same date or one day off, it's for that reason. It's a 19-year calendar. And to make the calendar work, some months are always 29 days. Some months are always 30 days. And 2 months, some years are 29 and some years are 30. And that's how they keep the cycle going. Because originally, when they saw the moon, it was either 29 or 30 days based on the sighting. But now that it's not based on sighting, they built it into the system. So that's why this month is always, meaning the previous month of is always 30 days. This month is always 29 days. Elul is always every year 29 days. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei. There's never 30th day of Elul.
I understand why you need to Rosh Chodesh.
Because again, technically the 30th day of the previous month is also the day when the new moon is coming out. Like, in other words, if you were in shul, before they bless the moon, in your synagogues, do they announce what they call the birth of the moon, the moled?
Mhm.
So when they announced the moled wasn't Sunday. It wasn't on Monday. So it was actually the new moon. But again, because of the calendar, that's why we do it this way, that it's always 30 and 1. So both days are Rosh Chodesh. So today is Rosh Chodesh Elul. And I just want to briefly, I do this briefly, and then I also do the parsha briefly, and I'm going to run over time. I'm going to say when we're done, so everyone can feel free to leave. If anyone wants to hear about the parsha, we'll continue. I can just see I have 7 minutes left, and I definitely think it's important. We're starting a whole month. So it's a very special month. God gave us an entire 29 days to prep for the high holidays. You can't like just sort of roll out of bed and roll into synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and make sure you got your seat, perhaps. No, you need 29 days of working on yourself. And there's a beautiful parable that explains this concept, and probably you perhaps have heard it before, but it's still worth thinking about again. There are many, many, many beautiful, beautiful concepts to explain this month, but I only have 7 minutes. So the story, this is a story, this is not true, is of a king. That the king had to travel somewhere on some important business. You know, kings don't usually have to go. They usually, people come to them for whatever reason, important business of the country. The king actually personally traveled. And now he's on his way back. And he's going with his whole retinue of, carriages. And he's traveling through the fields, the beautiful field of his country, go back to the capital. And as he's traveling, all the peasants are like, what? That's the king's carriage. Oh my gosh. And they all drop whatever they're doing, their farming implements, or they're tanning, or they're cobbling, baking, these simple people. And they run to stand, their king's passing by. And they're just standing thinking they're going to get a glimpse of the carriage. And they'll be able to tell their great-grandchildren they saw the king's carriage. That will be with them forever. And to their surprise, the carriage stops. And the king comes out. And the king looks at them. And he looks at each person there. And the king is smiling, such a beautiful smile. And the king says, tell me, what can I do for you? And each person has his little requests, you know. I could have a few more acres, or if I could get a new and improved model oven, whatever it is, simple people, simple requests, whatever it is. The king doesn't say, oh, so true, you'll bother me with this. The king smiles and says, yes, 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 yes. To each person, the king gives this beautiful smile and says, yes. And then the king goes back into his carriage. And then all the people are supposed to go back to their jobs. But they're like, they were so like, wow, they're like, we're sticking with him. And as the carriage continues and the whole procession, all the people are following. And as they go, they travel, they follow, and they follow, and they follow all the way to the capital city, where they've never been, the capital city. They're peasants. They go to the capital. They come up to the palace. Now the king's getting out. Well, they're done. The king says, come with me. And as the king walks into the palace, all these people who would never be able to get an audience, never be able to step foot in the palace, they all go back with the king into the most royal chambers. And that is a beautiful parable that the first Rebbe of Chabad, referred to as the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, explained is the energy of these 29 days. The king is God. And for these 29 days, God is in the field with the peasants, here with us. And what is he doing here with us? He's smiling at us, which means that God has different attributes. God can be kind, God can be judgmental. What we really want from God is compassion. Compassion means even when you don't deserve it. Kindness, you know, I'm kind because you're so nice, but compassion is something different what you deserve. It's just free-flowing compassion. For the entire 29 days of Elul, God's 13 attributes of compassion are shining in our world. The sages, the Kabbalists that discuss this say it's such a high energy, it should be a holiday, but it's not, because the king's in the field. So it's not a holiday, and we still have to run carpool, and we clean, and we shop, and we work, and we balance our budget, and God's compassion is shining. And as we turn to God, when we turn to God, when we exploit this time, I have a friend who says that she feels the whole 29 days is like someone gave her a credit card, no limits.
How does she feel that?
Because she's very sensitive and she really gets that's the energy of
We
these
all
times.
should feel that right now.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
I daven more. I'm 70 years old.
You're here and I want, right.
I don't feel like.
Right. Well, but that's allotting your brain by remembering it, because unlike the peasants in the field, you don't necessarily see the royal wagon, the royal chariot. But if you can just envision, I think a lot of times it helps in all these things to have a very fantastic imagination. Like to have a very get really in that world of envisioning, whatever it means to you. You don't have to get king because we're Americans, might not relate to a king, but to me, it's just this beautiful, glowing smile. I feel like I'm warmed by that smile. And I know if that smile is coming from God, whenever I'm asking, he says yes. And I'm like, that feels so warming inside. And that's what I try to keep in mind for these 29 days. And then, as Yael said, because of that, how do we turn to God and ask? You know, how do we do that? Like in the story, we understand how they did it, but how do I do that? So we're told that Elul has 5 dimensions. There are 5 verses. The most famous one we probably know is Ani lidodi v'dodi li. I to my beloved is to me. That's the acronym for Elul, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed. There are actually 5 such verses that all spell out the word Elul. And those are the 5 energies of Torah study, of prayer, of acts of good deeds, of repentance, and of redemption. And those are the 5 tools that we grab onto to be our pivot to say, God, I'm asking, and I know you're smiling. And I know your answer is yes. And that's what we're supposed to do. It's an amazing opportunity. There's a secret that's been shared, the goods have been spilled, that it's very appropriate. Well, someone put on our group about saying chapter 27 twice a day. That's very important.
Is that after Shkia and before Shkia?
No, it's generally, you're supposed to do it actually in our prayer book. It's built into the morning and afternoon services, Shacharit and Mincha. If you don't daven those 2 prayers, I would imagine every prayer book it's there. But if it's not, or if you don't daven them, just sometime in the morning, say the morning one, that's for your morning prayers. And sometime in the afternoon before sunset, Save for the
You
afternoon,
have to say twice a day.
twice a day.
If you say once a day, you still get.
I'm sure whatever you do, God appreciates, but twice a day, supposed to say twice a day. And the secret is, once you did it for like a week, you snort really well the words. It goes fast.
So it's funny because like last year I started this, but it turned 26, so I was saying 27 for like the rest of the year. I'm like,
So you're really good at
it. But also, what if like one day you forgot the morning or something? Like the first day I wrote a photo, I'm like, oh wait, like yesterday I totally forgot the morning. Like,
So
So, like,
it,
is it, like, ruin
so
it, or
I
like-
wouldn't ruin it, but if it was me, I'd probably throw in an extra one.
right, so I said it twice. Like,
That's what I would do. That's what I would do. I don't know if you need to or don't need to, but that's what I would do. But there's no such thing as ruining it, just as Elle said. So what if you did it for 2 weeks and you stopped? Obviously, everything you give God, God appreciates. If we want the total benefits, we're gonna say it twice a day, every day. And if we forgot a few days, I'm sure God understands that he made us very human, but we're trying our best. Something else that's also really, really important, I know we discussed this before, is from today, didn't start yet. That Psalm started yesterday, but starting from today, every day we say 3 chapters of Psalms. Today we say 1, 2, and 3. Tomorrow we say 4, 5, 6,
Really?
7, 8, 9.
Wow.
And if you can't, you can. If you cannot, you cannot. I'm not putting anything on anyone. I'm sharing, and nobody has to do it. I'm not. I know, no stress.
By 29, you do the whole.
So what happens is, no, this concludes, we say it from today through Yom Kippur. Before Yom Kippur, there are various points of Yom Kippur where so by the time you finish Yom Kippur, you finish the whole book of Psalms.
Was it always 3?
It's 3 every day from today until Yom Kippur.
And then
Before Yom Kippur, I will tell you how to finish it off in Yom Kippur. So when you finish Yom Kippur, you finish the entire book of Psalms.
Well, is this in addition to the other songs?
Yes, yes, this is totally separate.
Yeah.
This was, I always, listen, I always go to this. It says, the third leader of Chabad wrote, this wasn't verbatim, this was written, that if we only knew the power of Psalms to draw down kindness and compassion, we would say Psalms all day long. But we don't, so we don't. And I was speaking to my Noahide group. This is a group of non-Jewish women. I'm talking about getting through hardships, and I gave various tools. And my last thing I said was Psalms. I said, whenever you really just can't handle it, just say more Psalms. And one of the women on the class, this is a non-Jewish woman whose husband just passed away after many, many years of a very beautiful marriage. And so obviously it's very hard for her. And she said, yes, she said, anytime where I feel like my heart is breaking, and at some point every day I feel that, I just open up the book of Psalms. And I just keep saying Psalms until like I feel centered.
Wait, so the 3 started from yesterday?
No, start from today.
I ate by someone's house in Brooklyn, and he had a very, very bad case of COVID and was on a ventilator in the hospital. And he said that like he made a suicide when he came out and was better. And the people there like were talking to each other. He's telling us in the showers, and the people there were talking to each other. No, I'm sorry, it was one of the guests at the suicide, and he said that like no one really knew each other there, and they were all like, this is so weird.
I heard the story.
Oh,
You were at this person's
I was
house?
at the
This is
guest's
an amazing
house.
story. Listen to the story.
Yeah, and so he was saying that like all the people at the studio said, like they were like, I don't really know this guy. It's so weird. I got an invitation. And then they were like talking, and they all realized they didn't really know each other. And when he spoke, when the person who had COVID spoke, he got up and he said that like he was really sick and he wasn't gonna make it. And I guess his name was passed around for Tehillim. And he said that he like he had this vision, he was looking down, and when they got the message, these are all the people that said a chapter of Tehillim for him. So they didn't even really know him, but like they said a chapter of Tehillim, and he's like, you brought me back to life. It was you, and like I wanted to just thank you all and like bring you all here. It was people that he like never been to his house before, like never, like this man had never seen his house.
I didn't know that. That was all.
Because he saw their faces.
He
who they were.
he was above and he saw. They were just saying, now, I don't know if they said it once or maybe they said it every day. You know, I don't know to what degree. I can't believe only like 30 people said to him, but the point being, he saw the people that were praying for him, and he saw those prayers were pulling him back down. And these people, I mean, there's somebody I say, Tilford now doesn't know me at all, but I know they're sick with COVID, and I say something for them every day until I hear there's good news, because whatever. Young guy, 27, sick with COVID.
Just a week ago, their son was lost in camp.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was crazy. And I think it was also 6 hours. We started the hill and chat, and then within that hour, it was down.
That was crazy.
That was
What
horrible.
happened? You just got lost?
That film chat though, like,
It was
gave
like
me
they
chills.
had
That
bench
was
or
crazy.
something. I don't know.
It was very, very.
That's true, the power of the home. So true.
Right, so therefore, when we're saying to say chapter 27 twice a day, we don't know what it's doing for us, but we trust the Arizal who started this and knows how many minutes it takes us to say it, that he's doing it for Ben. That chapter 27 twice a day, we're supposed to say from yesterday through Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is a final day of the Sukkot holiday. And that is the final day when our judgment is sealed, meaning it says our judgment is written on Rosh Hashanah, says it's sealed on Yom Kippur, and the sages say the books are put away on Hoshana Rabbah, which means you have until the final day of Sukkot to add a little more sweetness, add a little more goodness, add a little more blessings. So every single day until the books are put away, we say that chapter twice a day. And this concept of the 3 chapters of Psalms was told to us by the Baal Shem Tov, and he heard it from his teacher, who was actually a soul that descended to this world and taught him, called Achia Hashiloni, who's a prophet in the prophets, who came down and was his teacher, and he taught him this mystical secret that we say every day, starting from today, 3 chapters, 3 chapters, 3 chapters, and then Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, I'll post on our group how you finish it off, so you complete the entire book.
Right?
Yes, you complete the entire book of Psalms in conjunction with Yom Kippur. Your decree is sealed. You're saying, God, I'm giving you the whole book. From today, 3 a day to give the whole book.
As well.
Yes, absolutely. Shabbat as well. And if,
Not at night, not at night.
right, we don't say at night.
So.
So, yeah, but this wouldn't be considered an emergency. If someone's missing in camp, yeah, then you can say Tehillim at night. When someone's very ill, you can, but as this regular, you have to say it until night. Okay, it's 10:52. I could go on to everyone who needs to run. Should I go on about the parsha? Should I stop? Up to you guys.
So like 2 minutes?
No, it's longer than 2 minutes.
It's very interesting that after one-
You go run to work. Anyone else to run? Thank you so much for coming. Add her to the group. She's got to find out who these.
What's your last name?
I will.
Okay, and thank you so much for coming. So nice. Thank you, Shira, for remembering.
I was a little break in the beginning, but now I really enjoy it. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad.
Now I'm.
Oh, no text. I can text her really slow.
Okay. All right, so we expect you next week. You don't have to bring flowers.
Thank you. I'll try.
Sure, thank you.
No pressure.
Okay, Yael wants to hear, and other people have to leave. Or else to leave. I don't want no pressure because I know we're 7 minutes over. And I was like thinking, should I bring in the month at all? Because we're supposed to do the parsha. I'm like, how can I not bring in the month when it's the month of Elul and it's Rosh Chodesh? Like, come on.
I'm just gonna leave it on 2 minutes.
Sure. No problem. I'm a teacher. I'm used to people walking out. So this is Parsha Shoftim. This is so you have your Dvar Torah to impress your children with who still are not back in school, to actually give them some education on the living with portion. So there's enormous details in the Torah portion. I just want to bring out one that actually connects back to Elul. So in the Torah portion, we speak about cities of refuge. Cities of refuge were established for murderers, accidental or deliberate. If anyone murdered, they had to run to a city of refuge. Why? Because according to Torah law, if someone murdered, even accidentally, the immediate relatives of the murdered party were allowed to kill that person, and that was not considered murder.
Even if it was children.
Yes.
Children have good energy.
Probably true. So even if it was accidental murder, the relatives are allowed. Now there are certain cases that are not called accidental; they're called we call it technically oinus. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about shogeg, not oinus. Meaning, if you did not mean to murder someone, but you were careless and something happened, that would be considered murder.
Like a car.
Like the car accident, exactly.
That change.
Like the car accident, that would be considered murder. Accidental murder, but considered murder.
But you're not drunk.
Yeah, no. If you're drunk, we'll probably consider it deliberate, you know, or very close to deliberate. We're not saying drunk, but we're saying you weren't careful enough. According to Torah laws, that's the law. That's considered accidental murder. I mean, God forbid, as unfortunately sometimes happens, you know, a person's moving a car and suddenly someone like dashes behind them. They don't realize they're backing up, and God forbid someone passes away. that would be considered oinus.
Or the parents that leave a baby in the car because they change their routine, they don't realize that 8 hours later, like baby.
Yeah.
God forbid.
God forbid it happens. It actually happened to a distant relative of mine in Israel. It was the grandmother of the child. There was a grandmother, and she's every day she was such a good grandmother. She picked up the kid and drove them to daycare, and something happened one day, and
There's a change of routine. It's a change of routine.
something happened that just threw her off, and she forgot.
So in Israel now they're requiring it to like car seats that have like a monitor or an alarm system. I think it's hooked to your phone.
That's so
And if
smart.
you leave the baby in the
That's
car,
so smart.
Your phone will something like that. They're requiring it.
That's so smart because Israel is so hot. Yeah, but Israel is like, it's literally like baking an oven. It's so fast. You don't have to be so long. You know, it's so fast. It's so horrible. So, so it's not, yeah. So that's the law. So therefore, every murderer, deliberate or accidental, would run to a city of refuge. Because in the city of refuge, the relatives are not allowed to touch you. And then, you know, the tribunal court, the Sanhedrin would determine what your category is and what happens to you. So these are called cities of refuge. And if you were an accidental murderer, you had to live in that city of refuge until the passing of the high priest. The high priest passed away 3 months later. The high priest passed away 35 years later. Whatever it was, you had to live in that city of refuge until the passing of the high priest.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that was for an accidental murder.
When did all this change?
When we no longer had a Sanhedrin that could give out the death penalty.
When was that?
That was in, okay, right, we're talking about timelines. That was about 70 years before the destruction of the temple. Before, yeah, because
Who was
before,
judging them at that point?
because what was happening, because the way God set up his laws, we're not supposed to murder people. We're not supposed to kill people as part of judgment. It's supposed to be very rare. It says a tribunal court, a Sanhedrin, the supreme court of the land, which is the only court that gives the death penalty. If they gave the death penalty once in 70 years, they were considered a bloodthirsty Supreme Court. It's supposed to be it is so difficult according to Torah to kill someone. So, but what happened was before the destruction of the Second Temple, already everything was falling apart, civil law, everything was so chaotic that there was more and more reasons why people would deserve the death penalty. So they said, no, this is not what God meant, we're stopping.
What about self-defense?
Self-defense is not considered murder at all. There's no murder in self-defense. Just as this relative who murders someone is not considered murder at all.
There wasn't something to do with it, just stuff
Stopping the death penalty, yes. So it says they voluntarily moved out of the chamber where they ruled. It was called the Lishkas Hagazis, the chamber of hewn stone, because they're only allowed to give the death penalty there. And they left there because they did not want to give the death penalty anymore because it was too flagrant. It was happening too many times. And we always say, you know, it is very, very hard in Jewish law to give the death penalty. And we're like, but this isn't fair. We know this person murdered, but we can't do anything to him. So the answer is that there's a God. And we always go back to that point. There's a God and God will take care. So we never worry that we couldn't give the death penalty. And God says, better let hundreds of guilty people off the hook than one day kill an innocent person. If you know from New York, any of you have been in New York and know the Verrazano Bridge, right? Beautiful bridge in New York. So the Verrazano Bridge is named after an Italian immigrant named Verrazano, who was accused of a very bad crime and was killed. And later they found out that it wasn't him. Oops. So they named the bridge in his honor. Yeah, he got a bridge. So that's why God says, I don't care. Let hundreds of guilty people off the hook. I'll take care of them. Never kill an innocent person. Anyway, so that's the city of refuge. So the city of refuge is actually one of the 3 sources in Maimonides that Mashiach is found in Torah. Meaning the prophets are flooded with Mashiach. All the prophets, and of course, especially Yeshaya, Isaiah, who is the prophet of redemption, and there's so many prophecies of redemption, the prophets. But in Torah, Maimonides finds it 3 times. 2 verses, all the prophecies of Bilam, and the cities of refuge. How does the cities of refuge have to do as a proof of Mashiach? Because according to the Torah, we're supposed to have 9 cities of refuge, but they only established 6. Moshe established 3 on the other side of the Jordan, And when the Jews came in, they established the other 3. So they established 6, but biblically they're supposed to be 9. So what happened to the other 3? So it says in the verse, in this week's Torah portion, and when God will broaden your boundaries, then you make 3 more cities of refuge. So the sages say, when's this in? When are we going to get so much more land? Again, we have 3 on one side of the Jordan, 3 on the other. We're supposed to make 3 more? When are we supposed to get 3 more such land? So they say that means by the redemption, because when God promised Abraham, the land of Israel, he promised 10 nations. The Jews only received 7. And we're told the 3 additional ones, referred to as the Keni, Knizi, Kadmoni, were not given to us. They were given to Moab, Edom, and Ammon. And by Mashiach, we'll get those 3. And I've seen maps where they map out those 3 additional lands, and it's huge tracts of land. So in those huge tracts of land that we're going to get by Mashiach, we're going to put 3 more cities of refuge. So therefore, Maimonides says, this is a proof of Mashiach's coming, because this is a mitzvah. This is God's will. And this will can only be fulfilled when we get those lands that we're only getting by Mashiach. And this is actually, Maimonides holds the strongest proof. I said there are 3 proofs. Sorry, there are 3 proofs of Mashiach's coming in Torah. One's a verse, and God will restore your captives. One's the prophecies of Bilam, and one's this law about the cities of refuge. So the 2 verses, Bilam's prophecies and the verse, and God will restore your captives, Maimonides writes in one law. Maimonides separates and makes an entire new law, this proof from the cities of refuge. Why? Because if it's a verse, and God will restore your captives, if it's the prophecies of Bilam, all those beautiful prophecies about Mashiach, then God could fulfill it, not in a physical fashion. He's keeping his word, but it's not Mashiach as we understand it. But this is a mitzvah. This has to happen physically. There has to be a city. There has to be land. So this is the strongest proof, according to Maimonides, that Mashiach is going to come in a physical reality. Now, it's very interesting. Exactly. So it's a very interesting question. Tiona's right on target. That's really weird. So God wants to ensure there'll be a physical Mashiach. So God makes a mitzvah contingent on Mashiach because it's got to come, because the mitzvah has to be fulfilled. Of all mitzvahs, the mitzvah of if you accidentally murder, here's your city to run to.
There's going to be murder.
There's going to be murder when Mashiach comes? Great question. So there's the sages all ask the same question. And there's different answers. One simple basic answer is there's not going to be any murders by Mashiach, but any Jew that murdered from the last time the cities of refuge were operative until then, which is, over 1900 years, they all are going to have to temporarily go into the city of refuge for that spiritual cleansing and then leave. So they might be very full for a few days, because every single Jew that ever accidentally or deliberately, a car accident or this or that, anything that ever happened that caused you caused the death of anyone, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid.
Physical death if you bear somebody killed.
No, physical death, only physical death. Now it's interesting on a spiritual level, and I wanted to tie it back to the month of Elul. On a deeper level, another reason why of all mitzvah, city of refuge, I mean, who's murdering? And so I said it's for the penance for any Jew that ever murdered since the last time cities of refuge were operative. Well, by the way, besides the cities of refuge, they were also able to run into any of the cities of the Levites. The Levites had their own cities, so they're also able to run into any of those cities, which also provide the same refuge, and they also lived there until the death of the high priest. On a spiritual level, anytime we sin, and this is a little bit confusing, it's considered like a murder, meaning we have a godly force inside of us. We have a godly soul, a piece of God. And we have this appendage, an angel called the evil inclination, who also might refer to as a Satan, also might refer to as an angel of death. It's all the same energy. Anytime that side wins and a person sins, it's considered like murdering, like spilling the blood of your godly energy. So it's a little bit weird because you were murdered and you are the murderer. On the one hand, you were murdered. That godly piece in you is blood is spilling from your sin, but then you're the murderer because you're the one that did the sin. And what does our lovely, wonderful companion, evil inclination, do? First, it entices us to sin, and then it runs upstairs to tell on us, right? Like the kid that gets his sibling to do something wrong and then says, "Ma, you know what they did?" That's exactly what our evil inclination does every single time. So allegorically, we all were murdered, and we all are murderers. And as murderers, because we created these sins, we have to run to the cities of refuge, not a physical city of refuge, but the ultimate refuge. What is that refuge? What is the ultimate refuge? Torah. We're told Torah is the refuge from the bloodthirsty relatives, which connects back to Elul, which is why I want to bring it in. If I was looking for something to say about the Parsha, I'm like, oh, this is Elul, so I want to say it now. Because remember, I said there are 5 verses, all of which spell out the word Elul. Like the most famous, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, which is a phrase that's talking about our relationship to God and prayer. So there's also a phrase, I said it was prayer, Torah, good deeds, repentance, and redemption. So there's a phrase about Torah. What is the phrase about Torah that spells out Elul? Ina liyado v'samti l'cha. Ina liyado v'samti l'cha, which spells out Elul. What is Ina liyado v'samti l'cha? That's a verse about the cities of refuge, because Torah is the refuge. So when you need to run because of the murders committed, because of the sins, we're told in the month of Elul, run into Torah. Torah is your refuge. Torah is going to protect you from any of those negative forces that got you to sin and now want to prosecute you for sinning. And this sort of relates to a beautiful little idea of the Baal Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov, when there was the Mabul, when there was a great flood, the Baal Shem Tov said, on the verse, it says, God told Noah, Bo el hateva. A teva is an ark, right? Go into the ark. Go into the ark, you'll be protected by the waters of the Mabul. The Baal Shem Tov says teva not only means ark. What else does teva mean? What's a teva? Teva, a word. A word. No, that's teva. Teva is a word. Tevot. It's words. So the Baal Shem Tov said that every Jew is like Noah. Every Jew has the waters, the raging waters of the Mabul pulling at them. The waters of the great flood are trying to destroy all of us. And God says to us, come, Bo. Come into the teva, come into the words of prayer, come into the words of Torah study. That will be your teva, that will be your ark that will protect you from the waters of the Mabul. So, in Aliyah,
The stresses of the year.
exactly. So, in Aliyah de V'samti Lecha,
What's that?
which one?
Is that Aramaic?
Which one?
No.
No, it's Hebrew. In Aliyah de V'samti Lecha, it came, chanced to his hand, this murder, and therefore I have placed for you the city of refuge. In Aliyah de V'samti Lecha, like Ona'ah. So in Aliyah de V'samti Lecha, Elul, you've got all these pressures and stresses and accidental murders on your slate. Run into the city of refuge. Run for the days of Elul into Torah study. If you didn't do it before, try to do it now to create the protection, like that teva, the words, the teva, the ark, to protect you from the Goel Hadam, to protect you from the prosecution for all the accidental murders of the godliness of ourselves through the sins enticed by the Yetzer Hara. So it's a really awesome time. It's a really auspicious time. And it's a time when God is smiling at us. So we should feel the compassion, and we should try to do whatever we can to access the compassion. Meaning the compassion is there, and we want to do what we can to like, take it in, take it in, take it in. Anyway, thank you for the extra time. I'm so happy that you're feeling better. Sure. Let me turn off this recording.
Thank you.
Okay.